Hello, you lovers of veteran rock and roll. Welcome to Full Record Jacket, the show that features me, Phil, and he, Ben, if he can control himself and stop
How are you?
laughing. Yeah.
How are you,
Welcome
Phil?
to this edition. Now, don't get angry with us. We're going to get close to an album that came out very, very recently.
Across the whole wide world.
It's an album that gives us the sweet sounds of heaven, takes us to some
Yep.
dreamy skies, and
And you could
well,
mess it up, couldn't you, Phil, this
I
intro?
could very easily mess up this intro. I'm depending on you to bail me out, Ben.
Well, thank you, Phil, sir. Thank you. But like a rolling stone, I will gather no moss.
Tell me straight, Ben, which album are we talking about?
Lighthouse Family's Ocean Drive.
If only.
We're talking about this up here. Look, I've got it.
All the music nerds have done this already a few weeks ago, so we didn't want to join the melee at the time, but we thought we'd allow the album to seep into our subconscious and then talk about it. So let's talk first about the Rolling Stones. Ben, what's your earliest memories of the Rolling Stones? Because you were born sometime after the Stones started.
In fact, most of us on the planet were born sometime after the Stones started. Yeah. I think Jack the Ripper was still in business when Mick and Keith got their guitars out. You know what? My earliest memory of them actually is, I think I mentioned it on the Rolling Stones quiz, was the even though I didn't realise it was a Stones song at the time, was the Scotch video advert, re-record and I'll fade away, re-record and I'll fade away.
I remember that. Was that the one that had the skeleton in it?
That's the one, yeah.
Cartoon skeleton. That was Scotch videotape. But did they actually use the Rolling Stones track on that then?
Well, it was them sort of singing it, wasn't it? But they were sort of using bits of it. You'll have to look it up on the Tube of You. And then I suppose from there, they were always around. I suppose they're like the Beatles, aren't they? They were always around, but I think they first really came into my prominence. There used to be a TV show on ITV on, I may be corrected here, but it's either a Friday night or a Saturday, Tour of Duty. And the closing song to that, because it was about the Vietnam War, was Paint It Black. And that's really what sparked my spidey senses into them. And then I, from the age of 16 to 21, I dated a girl, and her dad was into the Rolling Stones. Not massive, well, he had all their albums, etc. Well, at the time, I remember him having the big Exile on Main Street box set on CD, and and I think just becoming a kid of the 90s, enjoying Oasis and that sort of stuff, you kind of migrate into thinking, oh, where did this come from? And like I said, the Stones have just always been there. They're like the sun and the Beatles and stuff like that. It's something that's always been a part of my life in one way or another. You know, if it's from comedy shows to people sort of like ripping Mick Jagger and his all that sort of stuff, you know, to the music, really. So yeah, that's my Stones, you know.
Well, I got into them properly when I was I would have been about 16, 17. I always liked a lot of older music, but I used to like a lot of 50s rock and roll.
Yeah,
when I was a kid.
50s Cliff.
Well, we're talking more, you know, Elvis and Jerry Lee Lewis and Chuck Berry. And you're winding me up, I know, with Cliff.
No, only because we used to play it, didn't we, on our radio show 2 minutes before, because it was the only rock and roll we could find. It was about 2 minutes 30 long. Was 50s Cliff
on that particular computer in that particular station,
radio station? Yeah.
But of course, Cliff was kind of cool in the late 50s because he hadn't done all his stuff that he did afterwards, so he was seen as being a credible sort of British rock and roll star. But we digress.
We do.
But yeah, when I was about 16, 17, I borrowed my auntie's original well-worn Decca singles. She had virtually all of them on Stone singles from the 60s, and the first two LPs as well. And so that's why, that's when I really, I suppose, became a fan properly of the Stones. And then I started buying more of the albums, and then I
Yeah.
ended up, just gradually building that collection over the years. But I'd say,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, I would say a lot of my more recent sort of, and I would say from the late 90s onwards as being more recent, probably came from you sort of pointing me in that direction, as it were, to some of the, maybe because I've often said, and I will get onto it on this album anyway, you can't, the Stones for me have always been a singles band, if you know what I mean. But we'll talk about that in a bit, and I think you helped me discover a bit more. God, I am blowing smoke up you something rotten,
you
aren't I?
are. So,
It feels uncomfortable.
Well,
To be fair, but
it feels uncomfortable to have the smoke up there. I was say, but
yeah, I bet it does.
now there's with the Rolling Stones. I'll try and take an objective view or look at the sort of different viewpoints there are on them. They are generally respected. There's sort of three kind of positions on the Stones. Well, you could say there's four, because obviously there are some people who say they don't like the Stones or try to disparage them.
I never understand that. People who say I don't like the Beatles, it's like,
if we try to do, we'll just politely skirt around those people, because obviously anyone who's watching this video is probably unlikely to be a Stones hater or someone who claims not to like them,
unless they're into a bit of S&M, and then
maybe. So one viewpoint is the very purist view, which is that the Stones were great and culturally relevant up to, say, 1972, and everything they've done since then has been a shadow of their former selves. That's one viewpoint that's held by a contingent of people. And the cut-off point is usually Exile on Main Street, although sometimes, generously, it's given to be Goat's Head Soup. So they haven't done anything decent since 1973, goes the received wisdom. And I must admit, when I was younger, I was slightly tempted into that kind of viewpoint. And I did listen more to the 60s stuff and those Jimmy Miller albums, the late 60s, early 70s stuff. And I wasn't really as interested in the stuff that came after that. So that's one viewpoint. The other viewpoint is, they were okay in the 70s, but they haven't done anything decent since about Tattoo You, which of course came out in, I think, 1981. Sometimes that's extended to allow Undercover to be considered the last credible album.
See, my Stones, there's a blank spot in that 80s, 90s period, up until Bridges to Babylon.
Right. So that's the other one. And the reason for people hold those views is because they see the albums that have come out, I suppose since about Steel Wheels. That was the time when the mega touring started. So the Stones became this mega touring act worldwide.
Mega tour sounds like a cheap tours, Transformer.
Yeah. So that was the what's seen as the corporate touring era, big sponsorship, whatever. And the view from people who disparage the later stuff is that the albums have only been made to really just say, we are still a band doing new stuff. We're not a complete oldies act. We've done a new album. So we're going to go on tour, but not many songs are played live from the new albums, and they're quickly forgotten about until
it becomes a greatest hits tour every time.
Yeah, it becomes a greatest hits tour. So that's the view. Obviously, the other view is the diehard Stones fans who love everything and are open to everything, even up to the recent stuff. So it depends which camp you fall into. Now, I expanded my palette
cranium
of Stones listening over the years, and I think I'm now at the point. Maybe it's just because they've been part of your life for so long, but I'm now much more open to listening to the later stuff as
older. I was going to say,
as well as the early stuff. Yeah, so what you might call the modern era Stones, anything from the sort of 90s and 2000s.
Well, I did turn you back onto Bridges to Babylon, didn't I?
Yeah, Bridges to Babylon. When that came out, that was good. Obviously, I vaguely remember Steel Wheels. I remember the Steel Wheels Urban Jungle tour. I don't remember the Steel Wheels album so much, but I remember that tour taking place. And I remember the Flashpoint live album in 1991. I then remember Voodoo Lounge coming out in 94, which was quite well received.
Yeah.
And when they toured that, a few of those songs got played live. Then they did Bridges to Babylon in 97. That was an album that got criticised for trying to be modern by some people.
Yes, yeah.
Because they used a number of producers, and I think they worked with Was it the
Yeah, it's
Dust
got
Brothers?
Angelina Jolie in the video to
In a video.
Anyone See My Baby?
Yeah, well, that's a typical Mick Jagger thing, isn't it? Because we'll get a movie star involved. You know, he's the one who likes hanging around with all the showbiz
I like
people.
Saint of Me. I really like Bridges to Babylon. I think it's got
I like
three.
it.
I think it's got 3 Keith Richard vocals on it as well.
Yeah, so the most Keith songs on any album. But I enjoy the album. I think it's a good listen all the way through. But I do wonder sometimes whether the people who disparage these albums have listened to them in a while, because you might, if you go back to them, you might discover, you might be pleasantly surprised.
I always remember about Bridges to Babylon, reading the review of it on CFAX. Remember when CFAX used to have music reviews on it? And it was quite scathing. But I always liked it. To be fair, I think during that mid-90s period, because they obviously released the Stripped album, which I really liked.
Yes.
I really liked that because I think what got me into that was seeing the video for Like a Rolling Stone. You know, where it looks like it pulls, the video's being pulled it all this way. And I that sort of turned me on to that album. That was probably one, up until recently, one of my probably more listened to Stones albums.
Yeah, no, that was a good modern Stones album. The only thing about the Stripped album is that most of the songs on it were taken from that late 60s, early 70s period, the Jimmy Miller produced period. So that kind of fed in a way, kind of fed into this myth that was their best music, and the stuff they'd written since wasn't as good. So some people who like to say, oh, they were only good back in the day, liked that album, but said, oh yeah, it's because it's the songs from back in the day. So it's a bit of a...
Well, my daughter was actually born to the version of Wild Horses from that album. That was playing when she popped out the Baby Maker.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting one. I've never heard that one before. So, yeah, I mean, obviously we've had other albums since then. There's been a bigger bang. I suppose the criticism of some of these albums, certainly with Voodoo Lounge and A Bigger Bang, is that they are quite long albums. I think Voodoo Lounge has got 15 or 16 tracks on, and I think
Bigger Bang about 60 odd minutes.
I think Bigger Bang is over an hour, and I think it's 16 songs on there. So you know, some people say, well, they should have put some of the tracks as B-sides, and they should have cut them down and made them more like.
When was that? 2005. Bigger Bang.
More like a 70s album. And of course, they did do a shorter album. In more recent years, they did the Blue and Lonesome album, which is the blues covers album, which is a little bit more towards classic length. But of course, the new album is pretty much classic length. It's 48 minutes. There's 12 songs. Hackney Diamonds. We thought we'd better review it quickly before it became Hackneyed Diamonds.
Yeah.
We're a bit late compared to most geeks. So I've watched a fair few nerdy people online reviewing this album and seeing and reading the comments from various fans. And I think it's fair to say that this album has been generally well received.
I think so.
A lot of Stones fans are loving it. A lot of critics have given it good reviews. There have been some dissenters. I think Pitchfork magazine online gave it something close to half marks or something. They had a review disparaging it. And I have seen one or two people doing takedowns of the album, but it all seems to revolve, the negative views on it all seem to revolve really around the choice of the producer, Andrew Watt, about whom I must admit I knew very little. Did you know anything?
He's a bit of a pop guy, isn't he?
Well, apparently he's worked with, is it Justin Bieber and that kind of thing? Although he also claims that he's a big Stones fan. But he's a kind of trendy-looking guy. He's got very short-cut hair that's dyed blonde, and he wears, colourful glasses, and he's, he just looks very trendy. But he's clearly got a lot of musical talent. I think he plays guitar, and I think he might play a bit of bass on this album as well. And, the criticism of the album is that it's got too much of a polished sheen to it. But
I must admit, I think it's polished, because I've even said that about the cover. The cover's almost polished. It's very polished. It's very... I'm trying to sum up. We did have a discussion about the cover, because a lot of people hate it. I don't think it's that bad. But it wouldn't be it wouldn't be out of place if that was a Maroon 5 album cover.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't look like
A Stones cover.
it doesn't
possibly.
fit in with Let It Bleed or Exile on Main Street.
No, but it has got that polished feel to it. But I was looking at it earlier and I was thinking, do you know what? That could quite easily be a Maroon 5 album cover. So,
or Harry Styles or whatever.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those sort of 30 Seconds to Mars, something like that. So
now, apparently the woman who designed that is some kind of graphic artist who does these cartoon things as well. What do they call it? Anime or something? Or
anime, yeah.
And she was given direction. She hadn't heard the album, but they told her that it was an emotional album. That's what the Stones themselves told her. That was the direction she was given.
See, I don't mind.
It's been divisive, the cover art. It's definitely more divisive than the album itself.
Yeah, I don't mind that. The thing that I don't like is that.
Yeah, people have said that that's a waste of a gatefold, which
it is. Yeah,
I can kind of see. Although it looks kind of cool when you hold it back like that. It looks kind of cool.
Let's have a look.
But you don't get a lot of photos. But you see, they seem to be a bit camera shy now, given their age. They don't seem to.
Well, it could put off younger buyers, but they've got this insert, which the record does not go in, with all the sort of track stuff, which they could quite easily have put in that gatefold.
They could have put that in.
But that aside, I think possibly this could be my album of the year.
Yeah, well, I have to say, spoiler alert, folks, I do enjoy the album. I know I've listed all the things that some people have said negative about it, but I do enjoy it. The idea that it's a slick production or polished production, well, it certainly doesn't have that loose, ragged feel of Exile and Main Street. It doesn't sound like
no,
Miller
it's not that.
But then the Don Was albums, from the 90s, starting with Steel Wheels, they were quite modern productions. I mean, they were not, they were not throwback style productions. They were state of the art studio productions. And I think it would be, to say that the Stones have suddenly gone poppy. They've done things like this before. Mick Jagger's always had quite commercial instincts, and he's always liked to have a hit.
It's kind of a natural progression. I mean, they have been going for 60 years. But even bands that I like Matchbox 20, people like that, who started off rocky, do end up going into a more pop vibe. And the thing is, this isn't 1966. This is 2023.
No, exactly. And of course, they did this with Miss You. That was a disco-influenced song, which was very poppy at the time. And so Mick Jagger's always quite liked to do things that are popular and in the zeitgeist. It's Keith Richards is the traditionalist, the blues.
The thing is, I think if they tried to harp back to that 60s glory, people would be going, oh, well, they've aimed for the stars and failed miserably. They're trying to recapture old glories. So you can't win, which either way you go. But I would say, Phil, there is not, some people may disagree with me on this one, but I will say it. A lot of Stones albums can be quite patchy. They are singles albums. There's, where I would say on this, which I have said to you is very similar in vibe to, I think it's because of the production, Two Bridges to Babylon and Mick Jagger's 2001 or 2002 solo album, Goddess in a Doorway. It does have very much of a feel like that to it. Mm. But I would say this is a Stones album. You can, I suppose the one track you might be able to is Tell Me Straight by the one and only Keith Richards track, which I really like. But apart from that, I wouldn't say there's a bad track on this album.
No, I don't think there's anything on it. I'm quite happy to play this all the way through. I don't have a problem with any of it, really. I have to say, the thing that struck me when I first listened to it, and I have to say I was outdoors and I was listening on...
Not in your neighbour's garden.
No, I was listening on little earplugs, but they're Cambridge audio earplugs, so they're quite good. But I was... The first listen, and I'd only heard Angry, and I'd only heard Sweet Sounds of Heaven once when I played it through. And the first thing that struck me was, wow, they're playing with a hell of a lot of energy. They do sound... Yeah,
there is a lot of energy in it.
They sound quite energised. And that was the thing that impressed me most about the first listen was like, Mick Jagger's vocals. And I'm thinking the guy's 80 and he's just banging it out, and he doesn't sound aged.
No, he doesn't. Whether he's had some enhancement on the vocal.
Well, I have seen a couple of videos where people have done analysis and an analysis of the single "Angry," where they claim there's a small amount of pitch correction been done to his voice. He has some of the notes and some parts of the vocal have been snapped to the grid to get him on key, but it's not overdone apparently, and it's not. I have seen some videos of him. He did a thing. Was it in New York? He did a thing on stage with Lady Gaga. They had her on, and they did some songs live in this small venue as part of the launch. It still sounds like Mick Jagger.
It does, very much so. I find "Angry" sounds a little bit AC/DC, that sort of rock and roll train.
Well, I think this is a thing that I've noticed. The guitar sound, because some people like the more sort of loose, ragged of the older Stone stuff. This is a bit more sort of, how I could describe it, a bit more tight, and it's got this sort of, the guitar sound is more towards AC/DC.
Yeah. There's a very much in some of it though. It's quite punky, quite clashy, quite Sex Pistol-y.
There's one song at least that's quite punky, isn't there? Which bizarrely is the one with Paul McCartney on. It's not a silly love song.
Bite my head off.
Bite my head off. So the thing I found, there's a lot of energy on the album, and a number of the tracks, I get the impression that they bang this out, or certainly the basic tracks. Obviously, there must be some overdubbing and stuff gone on, but that they banged a lot of this out as live in the studio. It gives that vibe.
That's the feel I get from it. It's got very much. Keith's song sounds very much live.
That was done as one, and it does sound as if. Well, from what I've read about it, the track with Lady Gaga on the "Sweet Sounds of Heaven," that she was sort of spontaneously adding these vocals while they were playing. And Stevie Wonder, of course, is on keyboards on there.
He is on keyboard, yeah.
And it's got that ending where the song ends and then they decide to go one more time. When
they have that sort of shout off.
Yeah, you hear that happen in the studio, and it sounds spontaneous, as if they spontaneously decided to carry on playing. Now, whether that's a false spontaneity or a real one, I don't know, but it does sound as if they are doing it pretty much live.
Yeah, because I saw a video of them performing it live, and it was, Mick was live, and he can still belt it out, can't he?
So I do think the album has got a good vibe. I don't find the production gets it. I think the performances are good. I think the songs are consistently good, and I don't find the production gets in the way of it for me. I've enjoyed it.
And do you know what, Phil? Get Close, the second track, has a sax solo.
Yeah.
It didn't make me sick in my own pants.
Well, you see, they've always had good sax on their records because, of course, the late great Bobby Keys. Good sax on their records. The late great Bobby Keys provided the sax. I'm not sure who it is on this one.
Kenny Rogers.
Get Close to Me is ever so slightly like a modern Nashville country song. Am I justified in saying that?
What, track 2?
Yeah, or is it Depending on You is a bit more like a country song?
That's a slow down. It's very similar to Angie. It's that sort of, it could almost be the cousin to Angie.
Depending on You.
Because Get Close is the one with Elton John on piano.
That's right. Now, I can't really hear much of Elton John on that. Can you hear much of Elton John on Get Close?
It kind of gets lost a little bit in the mix, I think.
I'm surprised. This is the one thing. If I was going to say one critical thing about this album, is that the appearance of Elton John on both tracks that he's on, I'd like to have him turned up a teeny bit in the mix because I don't hear a huge amount of piano.
It does have quite a 90s vibe, the chorus in Get Close.
Yeah, it's got a. I can see that some people would say it's too poppy, but I don't. I think it's a good song. I don't mind. It's not too poppy for me, and I do like that sax solo. Angry, of course, everyone's heard Angry, but I know what you mean. Some people have said a little bit AC/DC. Some people have said a little bit In Excess. Which
I can see that.
There's a track on A Bigger Bang called "Look What the Cat Dragged In," which I've always liked, and that is a little bit In Excess as well. But I do like it.
Like I said, I think it was. It did, like I said, it very, very did have very much a feel of that solo album from Mick Jagger in the early 2000s. A lot of this.
I'll Bite My Head Off is the one with
Paul
Macca,
with a bit of fuzz bass.
Macca on bass, who gets name checked. You hear Mick say, "Does he say come on, Paul?" Or
Come on,
something?
Paul, yeah, something like that, yeah.
So
but I would say this is very clashy, very Sex Pistol-y, this song.
And again, it's claimed that McCartney was playing as live with them. He wasn't dubbing it on later, like so many of these guest appearances. That this was a real, genuine collaboration in the room. So,
is it this? Sorry, dude. I'll let you finish. I interrupted you there.
Well, I was going to say that always adds a bit of energy to the performance, doesn't it? If they're really there together.
Because these are the two tracks, aren't they? Because there's this one and then Whole Wide World, where Mick does sing very much with all right, apples and pears, son, apples and pears, very Cockney, son. He goes all sort of London, don't he, boy?
He does. No, I don't think he's done that on a Stones track since. I think there's a track on Emotional Rescue from back in the early 80s where he sings in an English accent.
Yeah.
And the only other one I can think of, because I don't think he does it at all on Some Girls. That's a very American-styled album. Don't think he does it on Black and Blue. Doesn't do it on It's Only Rock and Roll. Doesn't do it on any of those Jimmy Miller-produced albums because they were all very Americanized. I think you'd have to go back to Between the Buttons from 1967 when Mick was a little bit English on some of those songs.
All right, Cockney, all right, son.
It's relatively rare, but does he do that at all on Goddess on the Doorway?
I'd have to revisit it. I don't think so. I don't think he does. But I would say Whole Wide World is the most Goddess in the Doorway track.
It is a bit of a Britpop moment because he's just suddenly doing it in this accent, which is reminiscent of.
Yeah, it's got a very 80s feel almost to it.
Yeah, I do like that track. I think it's good.
I do like that as well.
There's Dreamy Skies. Now, this is the song that sounds like it could be
Delta feel.
Well, it could be. It reminds me very much of something like No Expectations on Beggar's Banquet. It's that country blues style, in which Mick expresses a desire to get away from it all and not even have a satellite phone and go somewhere.
Yeah, and it's got the includes the lyric about a hoot of an owl, which I don't think there's any other song in the history of music that includes the line about the hoot of an owl.
Now
it's very bluesy, very back to roots, isn't it? Very back to sort of.
There is another Rolling Stones
roots.
There's another Stones song with a hoot in it though, because I'm pretty sure in Midnight Rambler doesn't he say doesn't give a hoot of a warning?
Quite possibly. It doesn't give an owl in it though, does he?
So it's the second hoot in a Rolling Stones song, but
the
first hoot of an owl.
And one thing I noticed on this album, there's twice they use the word. He uses landlord about paying his landlord.
Really? Oh yeah. Okay.
There's twice it comes up in. I can't remember what the tracks are, but it's
in Whole Wide World, isn't it?
I think it's in that, and it might be in this one as well. But there's definitely two songs where he mentions his landlord. I don't think he's had a landlord for about 50 years. I don't
think he has. It's bizarre, isn't it? Now, there's two songs on the first two on what are side 2 of the LP, I believe, have got Charlie Watts on.
Yes, they have, yeah.
Which is something to celebrate. Now, I have to say that Steve Jordan, the drummer on most of this album, who, of course, was the understudy to Charlie and worked with Keith Richards on solo albums as well, I think he's got the Charlie Watts style. I would be hard pressed to tell
the difference.
That's whether that's Charlie Watts or not. But I must admit, on I think it's on Live by the Sword, the drumming on there, I do think, oh yeah, that does sound very Charlie. There's something on there that reminds me that it's Charlie Watts. But Mess It Up. Now, these two songs have been criticised by some people as being the weaker two songs on the album. I
like Mess It Up. Mess It Up is almost like the cousin again to Miss You.
Yes, I know what you mean. It's got something. There's something about it, isn't it?
The only thing in that song, and I did message you, didn't I, the other day, that bit where he goes, really, really wanna, whatever it is he said, it reminds me of a Daniel Braybois song,
right? Which
I did send to you, which I can't remember the title of.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I will get the title for any Daniel Braybois fans. Written by, obviously, Greg Alexander from the New Radicals. Let's have a look, see if I can
But
find it.
that song that you sent me, which has got the bit in you think is similar, the start of that song sounds like another Stones track.
Yes,
Which one it reminded me of? Was it?
I'll find it in our conversation, which is a plenty. We have had plenty of conversations, so we do actually like each other. But outside of this,
I do like Mess It Up, and I particularly like the bit where he sings in falsetto. He suddenly goes into falsetto, and that I find that quite fun.
I'm just trying to. Blimey, Riley, we have sent. Anybody who think we're oh, here we go. It's Give Me a Little Sign, the single version from Daniel Braybois, 1994, and you said it reminds you a bit of Emotional Rescue by the Rolling Stones. The vocals in the first seconds.
It's the first few seconds. There's these backing vocals on it, and that reminds me of Emotional Rescue.
Yeah. But Daniel Braybois was the backing vocalist of the New Radicals. So there you go. So
now, talking of
link into...
Yeah, we're talking of Emotional Rescue. Anyone who thinks this album is too commercial or too poppy, it's not as much as Emotional Rescue, because that is a super cheesy... I enjoy Emotional Rescue, but I don't think
I've ever listened to it.
It's the one where Mick sings falsetto on it, and then he does that thing about the knight in shining armour.
Oh, I think
it's absolute cheese, but I find it funny as in a cheesy way. But so I can see why people wouldn't like it as well. But there's nothing as divisive as that on here, I don't think.
No, I like Live by the Sun. That's again another punky one. It's very. Do you know what it reminds me of a little bit? It's only rock and roll.
Yeah, it's definitely it just does rock well, and it's just
because that's the other track with Charlie on, and it's got Bill Wyman and Elton John on that one as well.
Yeah, you can hear Elton a bit more on this. He's a little bit boogie woogie. He's
boogie woogie. I like it when you say things like that, Phil.
So I like Elton on that. Again, I would still like him maybe turned up slightly in the mix, but it is what it is. It makes me wonder whether everyone involved with the album, because they know Elton John's on there playing the piano, and because they've heard it on when they mixed it, they don't hear it, or they hear it more prominently when they play it back because they know it's there. And maybe they needed somebody with fresher ears to say, "Hey, hang on a second, can't really hear him very well."
But they are all 80. I mean, let's face it, probably half their ears don't work anyway.
Probably, exactly. So that's down to Andrew Watt or whoever mixed this. But Driving Me Too Hard. Now, that's another one that's kind of helped me. I'm trying to remember that one. Is that one that's a little bit country-ish as well?
Yeah, it's got a very simple vocal delivery on it, hasn't it? It does remind me of another Stone song, but I can't remember.
It's kind of like
it is.
It's kind of like it's quite good. It's not a standout necessarily, but it's still pretty good. But
it's another track that wouldn't have gone out of place on Bridges to Babylon or Goddess in a Doorway, really.
Indeed. Tell Me Straight. Well, that's a pretty straight Keith song, isn't it? It's pretty much what you expect from a Keith song.
Keith sounding more like Bruce Springsteen than Bruce Springsteen sounds like Bruce Springsteen. Yeah.
Now, Sweet Sounds of Heaven has been raved about by a lot of people, and there are some people who consider that Sweet Sounds of Heaven is they think that is the only track on this album that's truly great and the one that will last the longest. What are your feelings on this?
That it's a song that just screams, "Take me to church."
Yeah, it's got that kind of gospel thing. It's interesting because it's got. It does remind me, in a way, of that late 60s, early 70s era of the Stones, although it doesn't sound like any particular track from that period. It's
not Give Me Shelter. What's the other track I was thinking of? It kind of reminds me of.
You can't always get what you want.
Yeah.
It's sort of, but it's not really like either of them.
No.
But it's got there's a similar vibe. It could have come from that era. It could, if that song could have been an outtake from that era. I suppose that's the
could have done with Billy Preston on the keys on it.
That would have been really good if Billy Preston had been on it. We got Stevie Wonder, so it's not bad. Some have suggested, and I have to say this is a good point, that I'm not saying that Lady Gaga does a bad job on it, but if they'd had a real gospel singer, maybe it would have been even better if they'd had like a really, really good gospel singer. But she does a good job on it, and I'm not knocking Lady Gaga. And then, of course, the whole thing finishes off with what is like a little coda, really, Rolling Stone Blues. Muddy Waters' Rolling Stone, which of course is the track that popped into Brian Jones's mind. The story goes, I think, that Brian Jones was booking a gig, and
they asked him what's the name of the band.
Yeah,
and that record was lying there.
Yeah,
but
I presume that's true. But yeah, Muddy Waters.
Was it a Muddy Waters song?
It was Muddy Waters. It was originally called Rolling Stone. They've called it Rolling Stone Blues here, which is that's in the blues tradition as well. That you slightly change the title of a song, call it or stick blues on the end. So that's within the tradition. Very good sort of stripped down Mick and Keith, very authentic. So yeah,
I thought it was a really nice way to close the album off.
It's a very good way to close the album. Now, some people suggested that would have been does this mean it's their final album because they finished with this song?
With where the name come from.
But then they've also talked about the fact that they've got most of another album ready. Mick Jagger gave an interview where he said something like, majority of songs we've already got in the can for another album. So they're threatening to do another one, which would probably have to come out sooner rather than later.
Well, let's face it, they ain't getting any younger.
You think they're probably going to have to do it in the next couple of years, or we're not going to be waiting 18 years again for this.
98-year-old Keith Richards coming out to play it.
So overall, I'm thinking, and I've been trying to think where this ranks in the Stones canon for me. And I'm going to say, I think because of the consistency
above Dirty Work.
I think it goes above Dirty Work for sure. And I think for me, it probably goes above. I think it goes above Emotional Rescue as well because I think it's more consistent. There's some tracks on Emotional Rescue that I think are a bit weaker.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, this is an album where every track you can listen. There's not that patchiness to it,
and I think it stands up well alongside the best of Voodoo Lounge. If you took 12 your 12 favourite tracks of Voodoo Lounge and stuck them alongside this, I think this stands up very well. I think it stands up similarly well against A Bigger Bang. In some ways, I might prefer this to Black and Blue. I know some people really like Black and Blue, but Black and Blue is a bit more jam oriented, whereas this is more concise songs. And I think I might prefer this to Black and Blue. Not that I dislike Black and Blue. And I'm thinking in terms of songs, I might even say, and maybe I'm saying this too soon, I should maybe wait a while, but I'm thinking I like this probably about as much as It's Only Rock and Roll. Because It's Only Rock and Roll, again, It's Only Rock and Roll. The thing that lets that down for me is the production is a little bit muddy. They've never quite come up with a version of that.
Is it in your top 10?
Probably not, because what would I put above this as Stones albums?
Exile.
It's difficult to compare it to the '60s albums because it's so different. Well, Exile and Main Street would have to be above this, and Sticky Fingers would have to be above this, and I'd probably still put Goat's Head Soup above this, and
Beggar's Banquet.
Yeah, it's a very different kind of record though. But Beggar's Banquet, I think, would still have the edge over this. But it's a different kind of thing. This is something to put on to rock out and have more fun with, whereas Beggar's Banquet's a bit more of a bluesy, authentic bluesy country-ish.
Yeah.
It's different. It's different eras. But, I think I'm not saying it's better or as good, but I think it compares quite favourably with.
We're going to have to push you for an answer.
Some girls, some girls I can put on some girls and enjoy that. And I feel it's a similar in a way to Some Girls. It's one you can put on and just enjoy it. And I'm thinking that's the closest album I can compare it to. But I'm not necessarily saying it's better. But for now, I'm enjoying it. Yeah, Stones. Yeah. I know some people say that Stones have gone a bit commercial with their producer, but if this is the Stones going commercial, I'm all for it because it's good fun.
Yeah, so, I would put it up there. Because I am in that bracket of people who don't put Bridges to Babylon as the second worst Stones album. And I could quite happily listen to that and this back to back with Mick's Goddess in a Doorway album. There could almost be a trilogy, is my view. Very good. Possibly, maybe my album of the year. Possibly.
Well, I must admit, I can't think of any new albums this year that I've listened to I can't think of very many new albums I've listened to this year. I'm very bad at this.
I've got about 1,000 of them down here. I haven't listened
I'm
to.
so retro that I'm not really up to date with the stuff that's been made this year.
Well, I'm true to form because at the moment my favourite 2 albums of the year. Well, there is one here which is really good, and I can't remember the title of it because it's that good. But in regards to new music, I would say it's either this one or Noel Gallagher's album are my 2 favourites of the year so far.
Okay.
So there we go. So it's 5 Mick and Keith's. 4.75 Mick and Keith's out of 5 from me, I think.
Well, the Noel Gallagher album is not really a rocking out album, is it? It's a more reflective album.
No.
So this has got to be your rocking out album of the year.
This is my... Yeah, I mean, Matchbox 20 released a new album. I tell you, those two are quite similar in, the fact it's gone poppy to sort of how Matchbox 20 have gone. So they're probably going to be my top 3 albums, but in what order? Who knows?
Well, that, folks, is that. What do you think of Hackney Diamonds? Are you a Stones fan? Are you in the... It seems to be the majority who are enjoying this record.
And if you are a Stones fan, if you're not a Stones fan even, why have you got 41 minutes and 11 seconds into this video for?
That would be a good question. But yeah, are you also digging this record? Are you a dissenter? Have you got different views on it? Is there something that you disagree that we've said? Is there something we should have said we missed out? Give us a comment and give us a like if you've enjoyed this video. We would
subscribe.
We would appreciate any subscriptions. And
we
any
would.
likes
we want to retire.
Yeah. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another video very soon. All the best.
Be good.